Hi, welcome to another week of nonprofit management and leadership in nonprofit organizations. I am one of your professors, Shay Everett, and we have a wonderful panel today. Two folks here already, a third on the way, and so she'll join as soon as she's here. And so let's start. This is our Young Leaders panel. Reggie, you want to introduce yourself
Sure.
and give a little background of what you do right now and then what you did previously?
Absolutely, yes. So my name is Reginald Young. I'm the Director of Food for Change at Houston Food Bank. Food for Change is a new initiative at the Houston Food Bank where we're looking to leverage the monetary and nutritious value of our food resources to support students and other people as they go through educational programs. And so really what we're trying to do is really change the way that we allocate our food resources to have more impact into the community. Prior to coming to Houston Food Bank, I actually worked in a national program called Feeding America, where I also did similar work working with children's programs and helping to expand nutrition programs like the Backpack Buddy program that you may see in some of the schools here in the Houston area.
Great. And Bill?
Howdy, my name is Bill Kelly. I'm the Director for Government Relations for Mayor Turner. I oversee both our federal and state lobby teams, as well as coordinate policy on the intergovernmental level involving our municipality. Prior to this position, I worked in a couple of nonprofits, one with Mental Health America of Greater Houston, and then prior to that, Planned Parenthood Federation of America, overseeing 6 states. I've worked in the state legislature as a chief of staff for State Representative Ellen Cohen, and was also the political director for Bill White for Texas campaign in 2010.
Great. And we are very lucky to have both of them here today. And with Ashley Graves on her way, we will introduce her as soon as she gets here. So something we started asking in our classes are about, it's about the hurricane and the relief efforts. And both of y'all were incredible, really big parts, played really big roles in it. Sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied right now. But what was your leadership role under those circumstances, and how did your leadership style change due to the kind of crisis that we were in? You want to start, Reggie?
Sure. Yeah, so at Houston Food Bank, anytime there's a disaster, particularly something at this scale, we go into specifically a disaster mode. And so my department generally focuses on programs, and so in cases of a disaster, we tend to become part of another department and work specifically on disaster-related issues. And so with regards to my team, we were essentially assigned to go and monitor some of the locations that we were allocating food resources to. So in the case of this disaster, we had to establish new temporary sites. These are shelters, these are other pantries, and areas that we may not have had partners before. And so with that allocation of resources, we wanted to be sure that those resources were going to the clients that needed them. And so my team basically took on a role of going out and visiting those agencies, identifying what their needs were their needs being met by the product that we were sending out to those communities, as well as giving them support on things that they could improve on when they're doing those distributions. And so specifically for my leadership, was essentially shifting my team's mentality towards a more dire need as opposed to our programs, and really holding our programs off so that we could meet the need of the community as it stands today. And so the interesting thing about the Houston Food Bank is that in the cases of disaster, we become a 24-hour operation. We're working 7 days a week. And so making sure that our team is taken care of so that they can manage the longer hours, the differences in their work was something that was really important to me. And so essentially my leadership style became more of a person who was really understanding of the situations that people were doing, and really trying to provide both support but also encouragement on how we should be able to address the concerns that were going on today.
That's great. And Bill, you worked 24 hours a day too for a good week or so.
Well, everybody with the city of Houston, I think, worked hard. Our first responders, first and foremost, being out and literally on the line, but also a number of our other city of Houston employees. My role with it kind of merged. Initially was with the mayor at the Houston Emergency Center in our incident command structure, where We coordinate communication with other elected officials, being able to marshal resources as those are needed by our Office of Emergency Management, communicating with various other offices. When we got into really the scope of the storm changing with regards to massive need to evacuate and a number of our neighbors flooded, we went and transitioned into operating the George R. Brown, which became the largest shelter ever in the history of the American Red Cross. And so Tom McCaslin, the director of our Housing and Community Development department, oversaw that shelter, and I kind of came in behind him serving as his kind of executive staff to be able to make sure that the resources that he needed were available to him. Want to specifically brag on our friends from the Houston Food Bank. We definitely saw them not only as a very dependable partner, but that brought a lot to the table as well. We went from a situation where we had 10,000 people to a situation where currently today we've got 1,050, but we also became a nexus with regards to a donation site. And you have experts at the Houston Food Bank who know how to run a distribution center. And let me tell you, you ever volunteer at the food bank, they have a really professional shop. It's very well done. We had to kind of create that on the fly with regards to the generosity of our fellow Houstonians bringing literally mountains of clothing and pallets of supplies. So being able to try and organize that to make sure not only that we were meeting the immediate needs of our flooded neighbors that were with us in the George R. Brown, but making sure that we were able to coordinate those services to our other areas that were very much in need, particularly Port Arthur, Beaumont, where there was, they had more concerns with regards to like the quality of their drinking water. In the city of Houston, we never lost control of our drinking water system, so the actual need for bottled water wasn't as great. We made sure to send all of our pallets and those type of materials down to Port Arthur and Beaumont that frankly just didn't have the infrastructure that you have in a major city like Houston to be able to try and deal with the real scope of how Tropical Storm Harvey really affected our communities on it. So a lot of flexibility on what the problem is at the moment, being able to try and organize and remember at the end of the day, no matter what your job title is, your job is to work on behalf of the citizens of the people of Houston and provide that good service. So whether that's organizing t-shirt sizes or organizing shoe donations or working with our friends at the food bank, you just got to get the job done.
Wow, isn't that the truth? Well, can each of you tell me a little bit about your leadership style? Bill, you want to start?
I think anybody that works for a mayor has to be able to incorporate that mayor's leadership style within how they conduct their office. Mayor Turner is somebody who sets out a very good vision and then expects his staff to be able to carry out that vision and goal. Early on in his administration, you know, he said he was going to focus on potholes and be able to get that done. And people are like, well, if you report them and you turn it around in a week, and he set the vision of you will turn it around in 24 hours. And 95% of the time we did. And so being able to set those goals and have staff be able to live up to that goals is really, you know, how he approaches it. We tried to do the same thing with, okay, we've got 10,000 people here, what do we need? We need to provide them with immediate medical assistance, and in this case, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee was instrumental in getting our disaster management ambulatory teams, our DMAT, on the ground, seeing in excess of 500 patients a day. We don't necessarily have an operational plan to be able to do that. It's just something that was needed to be done. So when the mayor wants to be able to provide these services, we set that out as our goal, and you just work together to be able to get it done. Previous nonprofits I'd worked with, such as Mental Health America, came on site to help provide behavioral health services to a clearly traumatized population that we were dealing with. So I think the best thing that we have going for us is knowing that we have a mayor who was the sixth of 9 kids that grew up in Acres Homes, who really talks about what it's like to grow up without health insurance. And so when you see the needs of a very traumatized and high social need population, being able to meet not only their immediate needs, but to try and plan what are they going to need as they transition back into permanent housing, was really kind of how he set that tone, and we just tried to follow up with how we would best want to serve our neighbors with it. So I know that's pretty nebulous on there, but when the mayor says do something, it gets done. So.
That's how it is, definitely. And when you, I've worked with you before, Bill, and how would people describe, you as a leader? I mean, I would say that you are pretty focused and clear and driven, but also lighthearted. Like you're incredibly funny, and so it's fun to have that kind of person around.
As long as Ashley Graves likes me, then I'm in good shape. But Ashley Turner now, I want to make sure I get that right. No, one of the things that we did, and there's been a lot of social media around it, that there is not an operational plan to operate a shelter of 10,000 people that you just pull out the handbook and that's what happens. You have to have high capacity people that just put their egos aside to say we have to get the job done. I think I have been extremely fortunate in working with great people like you and with Ashley, being surrounded by very high quality folks who want to get a good job done. I think Dwight Eisenhower said the definition of leadership is have someone else do something that you want them to do because they want to do it. And so being able to create a good situation where you have high quality people who want to do a good job in the best position to get that job done, even though it's really tough, I think that's probably the best environment that you want to create if you're in a leadership position on that, is to just put people in a place to succeed and then make sure that they have everything that they need to achieve it. But at the end of the day, you're only going to be as good as the players on your team. Whether that's the Astros, Rockets, Texans, or City of Houston, we've been very fortunate. And I want to say this too, our first responders rightly get a lot of credit with regards to the bravery and the work that they've done. But I want to also make sure and give a shout out to our folks from the Houston Health Department. Our folks that you're going to see out there right now as people are watching this in our solid waste department that are working night and day to be able to make sure that people get that sense of normalcy by picking up debris. Our health department folks who go cot to cot in our shelters to be able to ask what health needs people have and provide those services. So part of it, and I think Mayor Turner does a really good job about this, is recognizing that the city and his executive team and his team that works for him at the City of Houston are made up of people, and he wants to be able to have them do the best job that they can do, and I think recognition of those jobs is key to maintaining that sense of purpose within the community.
Great. Well, as you mentioned, Ashley joined us. Ashley Graves, now Turner, works with the Houston ISD and has a wonderful new job title. If you would introduce yourself, and we'll come back to this leadership question, but if you'll introduce yourself and explain kind of your role at Houston ISD and a little bit about other nonprofits or folks that you've worked for.
Great. So I'm Ashley Graves, now Ashley Turner. And I work for HISD. I'm the Government Relations Officer. Just got a new title, Chief Governmental Relations and Strategy Officer, which means that I oversee the local, state, and federal initiatives of the district. All the lobbying, the advocacy at all levels of government comes through me. The strategy behind how we get things done in the Capitol, both in Austin and Washington, come through me. It's an exciting job. I work a lot with Bill, work a lot with you, Shay, and it's a challenging job at the same time. So previously I've worked for the Greater Houston Partnership, doing lobbying for them, and then prior to that worked for a number of state officials, local officials, and federal officials.
That's great. Well, welcome. And something else that we had started off with after Harvey hit, and there was a lot of mobilization that had to happen, and Houston ISD had to meet the needs of kids that weren't in school and had no home and were in shelters, and then figure out how to start the school year. And so you were a big part of kind of that crisis management, and now we're in the recovery mode. So can you kind of talk about your leadership role during and after the disaster, and then how your leadership style may have changed under these kind of crisis circumstances?
Sure. So with Harvey, it was a pretty traumatic situation for all of us. I won't go into grave detail about that. I mean, I don't think our city will be the same after this tragedy, but we are very resilient, and so is our school district. And So my role was to keep the elected officials informed. So all of our local, state, and federal officials had to get regular updates, sometimes daily or multiple times a day from me, on what was happening on the ground. If it was, the fact that one of our schools in particular got severely flooded, like Hilliard Elementary, sending updates like that. News crews were at that particular campus, as well as when we were going to start school. That was the big question in the room, because the mayor wanted to get everybody back to work, everybody back to school as soon as possible. And so our superintendent, Richard Carranza, took that to heart and said, okay, let's get the kids back, but let's make sure that the schools are safe. And so I was charged with making sure the electeds knew about all those movements. And I think we did a very good job communicating with the city, the county, all the entities involved in the disaster efforts. I can't say enough about our officials and how well they did in managing this crisis at all levels of government. Our mayor was fantastic, county judge was fantastic, superintendent, everybody was all hands on deck. And it was just amazing to be part of that.
And then back to our leadership question, Reggie, can you share with us kind of how you would describe your leadership style, and maybe folks who work under you would describe your leadership style?
Okay, so I would suggest that my leadership style is more of like a strategic visionary. And so I think the thing that is important for me to do with my team is really set that goal for them, identify exactly where we're trying to go, and then provide them the parameters to be successful within those roles. And so I definitely try to emphasize everything from professional development to creativity within those spaces. I definitely want to make sure that they are on a path for success, and so I think that's where the strategy is really involved with that. But I also think that in order for someone to be successful and really enjoy the role that they're doing, that you have to give them and trust them to be able to make decisions for themselves and really own the position that they're in. And so I definitely think that providing a vision that people can relate to and really incorporate within the way that they work and the way that they see why they're in that position is something that I try to really facilitate for my team.
That's great. And Ashley, how about you?
My leadership style, you probably could comment on it since both of you have worked with me. I am pretty tenacious as a leader. I am pretty driven, and so whoever's working with me or working underneath me, I expect them to be just as committed as I am. And so I know that can be a bit much at times, but I'll just be self-aware in that category. But I think it comes from a sincere passion for wanting to get things done specifically for children and their education. We don't have a lot of time on the clock to make sure that every classroom and every child has access to a high quality education. And I believe that if you're touching the classroom in some way, shape, or form, whether it's you're the lobbyist or you're the teacher, it's important for all of us to understand that time's of the essence, and we have to get things done. We have to get things through the Capitol. We have to get things through the classroom so that kids have access to what they need to be successful.
And I will say, I've worked with all three of y'all, and I would say that something that y'all have that is wonderful, either being on your same level as an employee or a coworker or like underneath you, is that kind of sense of urgency, like having passion and being driven to make sure things get done. So that's always really fun to be around on a team. And all of you kind of have a good amount of influence in your organizations or the city government, and y'all are at a fairly young age. And so, can you tell me maybe a time where you had an experience or an opportunity that really changed your path and like direction, or really elevated you to something new and better? Anyone who would like to take that question first?
Okay, I guess the guys are looking at me. I believe in investing in yourself as a professional, and I didn't do it for a number of years for a lot of reasons. I think it took the right people coming into my life as mentors to guide me on the importance of professional development. And one in particular urged me to take a executive leadership class at Harvard. And it was like a week-long program, and they taught us about how to get results in a governmental agency, which of course is a very challenging thing in a political environment, but it really shaped me, you know, and I took this program last year, opened my eyes to the importance of investing in myself, but also tools I can use to get results in my current role.
That's great.
So I think for me, when I was in grad school, I did a lot of research internationally, and I was really interested in a lot of work in regards to how specific communities really address their usage of resources. And so particularly immigrant communities in Sudan moving into Cairo. And so I recall going out to Cairo and visiting and working with some of the community leaders within that area and thinking about the insurmountable amount of resources needed to actually make an impact for both the low-income residents of Cairo, but then also these refugees who were basically fighting for resources with this group. And I came back to this stage and really thought to myself that there's a lot of ways in which we have resources here in the United States that can be applied to really be impactful for communities in both my area in Houston, but also throughout the country. And so I really wanted to focus my attention on developing programs and developing initiatives that really could be impactful for people, because I realized we had the resources here to be successful within those communities. And so I ended up joining the AmeriCorps after I completed grad school, and that kind of solidified my path within the nonprofit sector and really gave me the idea of this is a place where my career could be.
That's great. Bill Kelly, any thoughts?
I claim to completely stumble into whatever success that I've had. The first campaign that I worked on after college was the Bill White campaign for mayor in 2003. I met a number of people in that, including Michael Moore, who went on to serve as Mayor White's chief of staff, who definitely has aided me as a mentor on it. Elena Marks, who I affectionately refer to as smartest woman alive, now with the Episcopal Health Foundation. Really, really brilliant person with regards to health access, working over at the Baker Institute. People like Sandra Shafto, who has more campaign experience and knowledge than we will ever even think about having. But being able to maintain those friendships and seeing how they cross-pollinate with regards to the other advocacy that I've been involved with. Elena was the national board president of Planned Parenthood after serving in Mayor White's administration on it. Sandra Shafto was one of the only people prominently involved in 2004 when I worked on Hubert Vo's campaign, which he won by 17 votes. And when you win by 17 votes, there's always a recount. Luckily, Shafto knew everybody to be able to help craft us a good recount team for Rep. Vo. It's just really been and now work with Michael Moore, who's taking on the daunting challenge at Texas Central to be able to put high-speed rail between Houston and Dallas. So I think one of the things that I've been very fortunate had to be surrounded by very successful people who have been influential in not just one campaign or one department, but around, and being able to maintain those relationships and respect the intellect and the ability for those people to see common problems and put things together. One person I want to make sure and give a shout out to is Ann Travis, who previously held my position under Mayor White's administration, who a year ago, after the tax day floods, had Lyondell-Basel provide the city with multiple high water rescue vehicles on behalf of Lyondell-Basel.
Wow.
So that's how important maintaining good relationships can be with it. So if there's a lesson learned with that, that's one on my end.
That's great. And that just made me think about how great campaigns are. We have a lot of students who are at all, stages in their life, some in their 20s, some in their 40s, and some are in nonprofit, the nonprofit sector, and others are not. And so would y'all say that like a campaign is a good way, no matter what party you're on, a local campaign, to really get your foot in the door and to meet people? Because I started out on Bill White's campaign as an unpaid intern, and in a month I was the statewide scheduling director. Like, only on a campaign can you move up that quickly. What other advice would you give to these students as they start a career in nonprofit management?
I think one of the key traits of being successful in the public sector is being scrappy, being able to just, get your hands dirty and really commit to a task or a mission. I think that's critical. All of us are in jobs that, of course, demand results, even in the private sector. But when you're talking about public work and nonprofit work, you're talking about work that's closest to the people. And so it is important that you maintain a certain level of dedication and passion for what you do, because otherwise you'll get burned out. It's very difficult work. You never stop working, you work around the clock, and the demands are high because people's lives sometimes are in your hands. So we all have to be mindful of that, and I think that scrappiness is a great trait.
Who else? Any other answers for that?
So for me, I would say for anybody thinking about getting into the nonprofit sector, they should also be very open to opportunities that are available. I think a lot of the people that I've interacted with that have come into the nonprofit sector may be specifically issue-oriented on one thing, and that's the only space that they see themselves working in. But I definitely will say from experience that when you find yourself in an organization, you also are able to influence that organization in a way of how they foresee the interest that you have in relation to the work that they're doing. So don't go to an organization and only because they deal with pets. There's a lot of ways you can interact with pets. At the Houston Food Bank, we deliver food to the wolf sanctuary. We deliver dog food to a lot of different places. We make dog food out of fish that we receive and send that out to places as well. And so there's a lot of opportunities to do the things that you're interested in organizations that you may not have considered previously. So I would say not to pigeonhole yourself into one view of what your career should be and what type of organization you should be at.
That's great.
I would say one of the remarkable things about campaigning and getting involved in a political campaign with somebody running for office is one of the things that, unless you are, born with the understanding about how every level of government works, during a campaign you're going to learn about different ways that government works. I know Ashley, for instance, she's dealing with federal programs and a changing dynamic with the Department of Education, our state and various lawsuits with funding mechanisms, locally here with the board. I mean, to be able to really recognize that an organization and a person wants to make a difference on this topic, well, here are all the ways that they can. And you'll learn about that if you care about the issue enough to really dig into it. There are very few issues that are bullet point black and white. A lot of them have a lot of complexities. And frankly, a lot of people that you may disagree with on 90% of these issues might be your best friend on a couple, key ones. I'll give you an example, Representative Dan Flynn. Representative Dan Flynn is one of the most conservative members in the Texas legislature, and proudly so. And he was our rock with regards to pension reform. He said, Mayor Turner, you know your city, you show me the numbers, you make this add up, I will be able to stand with you as chairman of the Pensions Committee and make this work. And he did. He was very true to his word. His staff read every number up and down and asked very tough and challenging questions. So even though I might have disagreed with him with regards to reproductive justice issues, making sure that you have a good relation with Representative Flynn going forward and the respect that having worked with his office really makes all of the other issues that we may disagree on a lot easier to talk about, just because we have that mutual respect. So just don't think that if you disagree with one candidate or the other that you can't work with them on a number of different issues that may come up. I mean, it's not, Mayor Turner has a good saying, in the city of Houston, we don't build walls, we build relationships. And I think the success of the last legislative session goes to show that during his time in Austin and now as mayor, he's really capitalizing on a lot of those relationships.
Mm-hmm. And even for students who don't want to or don't see themselves in any sort of government role, really any nonprofit that you work with is going to be influenced or impacted by what's happening at the local, state, or federal level. So all of this is incredibly helpful. Let's go to a question from a student. Luis Morales, he asks, for anyone who's ever challenged you as a leader, how did you react and kind of what was the outcome or any lessons learned there? I see this smirk on your face. This is great.
I'm not going first this time.
Well, I'll just say when you're in a competitive campaign, that's all about being professionally challenged, right? I think that one of the truest things that you can do is to be who you are with regards to how you work with policy. So in 2006, I was a campaign manager for Ellen Cohen. She took on the incumbent Representative Martha Wong, and Representative Wong ran this commercial. And this district was River Oaks, Bel Air, West U, so central kind of southwest part of the loop. And she ran this commercial about raising taxes, and it was like with cowboys and all this kind of stuff. And it was just like, this is not River Oaks, Bel Air, West U. This is not who it was. So for Ellen's commercial, we had her sitting on a couch, being able to explain why she's running. She's like, well, I could have moved anywhere 32 years ago, and I chose to move to Texas. The Texas Medical Center and MD Anderson helped save my husband's life when he was diagnosed with cancer. I want to represent this area because the promise it held for me and what it's done to help my family. To me, that was a lot more genuine, and whether you agreed with her politics or not, that was who she was, and she was able to communicate that out. She also won by 10 points, so I'll say it's effective too. But you know, when you get into that kind of competitive stake with it, frankly, people will respect you if you bring about why I am here and what I care about. It's hard to disagree that Ellen was for cancer research funding. You know, she was a breast cancer survivor herself. Husband had been kept alive by over 2 decades since the original diagnosis. That's who she was. Sarah Davis, who now represents that district, who beat Ellen, is also a breast cancer survivor and has that similar story. So being true to who you are in your biography, frankly, helps you out in these competitive situations when people challenge your leadership. And at the end of the day, you know, 3 of us worked for the same guy. We're very proud to have worked for him. He didn't win, but we're all very proud of who he was and what who he is and what that campaign stood for on it. So,
Absolutely. Anyone else? Thought?
So I can't think of a specific time that my leadership style was challenged. I definitely have been challenged based upon people assuming that you have a lack of experience because you're younger or whatever that may be. I recall being in the room with our leadership along with one of our board members, and we were trying to get some feedback on a new program that we were implementing and seeing if we could get some support from that. And the board member was like, well, I don't know who's running this program. I don't know anything about it. I don't know how we can support this. And I'm sitting there like, hey, I'm here. I run it. I do well, and I can do okay in it. But I definitely think that, I mean, to your point, definitely staying true to yourself is something that's going to be necessary throughout your career, regardless of anything a person challenges you on. And I would always say just be vigilant in what you're doing. Know where you're going. Understand where you're going, understand how you're going to get there, and always prepare to be successful within those roles. You always expect things to veer off, and if they do, you should have strategies in which to get back on track. And so there's never been a situation in which I feel as though I've been pulled off track based upon the comments or thoughts of another person. I look back at my peers, my mother, my grandfather, who went through some real serious things when they were trying to progress in their careers, and I place myself in a context where I don't have to deal with any of that. So any of the things that I deal with now are going to be a piece of cake as long as I'm prepared. And so you just prepare yourself for any challenges, including challenges on your leadership style.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
But I'll also say that the other thing that I would add to that is that you should also challenge yourself in every aspect that you're doing. And so I always reflect on how I can improve and what I can do to be a better support for my team, to be a better support for our stakeholders, and specifically our community, who we are always going to be held accountable to. And so definitely, if you're going to allow someone to check you for your leadership style, it should be yourself.
That's great. That's wonderful. And at Children at Risk, something that we do for most of our staff members is a 16 personalities quiz, where you kind of like learn what is your leadership style, what is your communication style, how do you work with others, and that can be incredibly revealing. Absolutely. Just to continue to be self-aware and to really accept criticism from other people and yourself. Mm-hmm. Would you add anything?
I would just add that in your career you're going to work with people who have different styles, and you might encounter someone who is particularly difficult. It could be your boss, a peer, or someone underneath you. And I say that one piece of advice is just to be the diplomat I know that's hard, but be the bigger person in those situations. Don't gossip about what's happening in the workplace. Don't vent to other coworkers about what's happening. Take it home, vent to your family, your friends, but don't leave it at the office. Because eventually difficult people leave. I've found that to be very true in my career. Absolutely. The people that are the biggest obstacles at work eventually go away. So don't stress yourself out over them. Don't let them challenge you or make you feel inferior. Do your work, do a good job, and keep your mouth closed.
That's great, and I really think that that's something that separates leaders from other good leaders from other people in an organization, is leaving that stuff at home and really focusing on your work while being friendly with everyone and getting to know people, but not gossiping or talking badly about situations or people. That's a great lesson. Is there a time that you failed as a leader, and like how did you handle it, and did you learn anything from it? We always talk about the successes and what's good, and but anything that went wrong, a time that you can recall?
I've failed several times. I think one moment that particularly stands out, it was a new program that I developed along with one of our community partners. And the community partner had been implementing this program for years within their respective community, and we wanted to essentially package what they were doing and spread it out to several other partners within our network. And that person was in charge of managing that and growing that program. And so that did not turn out to be the case. That person did not do a really good job in coordinating with the partners and in creating the program. And so what I learned from that was essentially what was my role in creating this problem that was once could have been a really good program turned not to become anything. And so essentially what I learned in self-reflection was I definitely needed to be more involved with the day-to-day aspects of new programs in different stages, and really being able to gauge how successful a person can be, not based upon their past successes, but more so on what they can do now and what kind of support that they need now. And so looking back at that situation really helps me to really do a better job in assessing programs, assessing the leadership of those programs, and assessing what I can do to support both that leadership, but also the people that are interacting with that person on a regular basis. And but I think the main thing that I always try to tell my team is that I'm not a punitive person in regards to failures on the workplace. If you're working hard and trying to do something and really trying to strive for success, I reward that. Areas in which we fail, we find ways in which to recuperate, come back stronger, and basically learn from our mistakes, use it as best practices, develop our learnings, and do better next time.
It's very helpful. Anyone else?
I was working in DC and was a young staffer managing a lot of things simultaneously, and I dropped the ball on a key project that the congressman wanted done. I was so flustered by that because we were in a staff meeting and then they were like, Ashley, so what's going on with that? And I said, ooh. So at that moment, of course it was a lesson learned, don't drop the ball, but also I knew at that point I had to talk to my chief of staff and say, you know, Jackie, I dropped the ball on that. I apologize. Can we work on perhaps managing my load as well, you know, because I want to make sure I'm contributing to the team, that I'm fulfilling my duties, but I don't want to drop the ball again. And so we had that conversation, and I was apologetic, and then she resolved my issue. And it didn't happen anymore. So I think that you have to be willing to, when you fail, quote unquote, I don't like to use that word fail, but when you make a mistake or you make a misstep, be honest with yourself and admit to what you did wrong and then try to fix it.
Great advice. Bill Kelly, anything to add?
Well, if I want to talk about my personal failures, we'd be here a lot longer than the length of the show today on it. But I think this is a good recognition. If you care about issues and you conduct yourself well, let me tell you about two people that lost races. This guy is a city council member, ran for mayor, big on infrastructure, engineering background, lost. Another guy, sterling record from housing with the Harris County Housing Authority, great educational background, great personal narrative, ran for city council, lost. Steve Costello and Tom McCaslin are going to be two of the most influential people, as Tom is director of our housing and community development and Steve is our chief resiliency officer, on the future of this city, even though they lost their elections a couple of Novembers ago. And so I think as people are in the nonprofit world, there will be advocacy campaigns and different projects that you have that won't reach the level of success that you want, but a lot of times that is, the Lord working in mysterious ways to show you and give you another avenue to be able to have even more of an impact. Keep in mind, our mayor has run for mayor twice and did not win. And now, a lot of people have said, we're really glad to have his leadership. What we thought our biggest accomplishment was going to be pension reform. Well, now we've got the largest natural disaster in the history of the state of Texas to be able to go through. So don't think that just because your definition of success isn't met that you aren't going to be successful on it. So a lot of times just keep being true to yourself and move the ball forward on it, because good things will happen if you're true to yourself on it.
That's fantastic advice. And Bill, you had mentioned a few really great leaders in the city earlier, but something that the students have been reading this week is about what is called in their book Level 5 leadership, and it includes great leaders who have personal humility and professional will. Is there anyone that comes to mind for any of you, leaders that our students can look to, or go Google, go to their websites, watch videos of them, anyone who exemplify that kind of humility and the professional will?
I think there's somebody who's got a very Texas story that I'd like to put out there, just with regards to determination. And both her and her mom, with Cecile Richards. I worked very closely with Cecile when I was with Planned Parenthood. This is somebody whose mother grew up, pretty poor in Waco, and eventually became governor of the state of Texas. Cecile went to Brown, came back, worked for Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi as her chief of staff for a while, and has just kind of put her heart and soul into moving in a very difficult political environment, Planned Parenthood and reproductive justice issues forward. I think she's somebody who very much kind of walks the walk and talks the talk on it. During the 2003 filibuster in the state, Cecile, we were late on being able to do this huge press conference, and so we had this banner, and we were set up in a park down from the Capitol, and she was in high heels and her dress, and ready to do a great press conference, and we couldn't get people there because it ran late, so she just got on the front of the banner in high heels and walked all the way right back to the state Capitol and marched up. I mean, she's one of those folks that just makes the best out of the situation that's presented there and continually does it day after day. So people want to Google her and read a little bit about not only Cecile, but also her mom Ann's story is just really, really very Texan.
That's wonderful.
I'll say Bill White. I mean, he comes to mind as I sit with the two of you. Working on his campaign, the three of us were exposed to servant leadership every day, working for Mayor White. And he's the first person I worked for who taught me about servant leadership. And he never wanted a bunch of fanfare and bright lights. He didn't want an entourage. He wanted you to drive him in your car. And, he was a wealthy man, and yet he was always about taking care of people who are at the bottom of life. And, throughout my career, I've been exposed to so many more servant leaders, and I'm fortunate for that, like Rodney Ellis and Sylvester Turner and Sinfronia Thompson and Armando Wally and Ana Hernandez, and there's so many people that I probably, if I named them all, someone would be mad if I left somebody off. But I think there are a lot of people in Houston that exhibit this aspect of servant leadership. And I'll even shout out Richard Carranza as our superintendent. He truly embodies this emotionally sensitive aspect of leadership that I haven't seen before. I mean, he is so in tune to what his staff needs, and he's so compassionate in a real way that people feel it. And it makes people want to come to work. It makes people want to work hard for him because he cares about them and what they're going through.
Wonderful.
So I think what's interesting about the situation with Harvey is that when we're responding to these issues, definitely people from your team as well as ours, have been affected by the hurricane personally. Their houses have been destroyed, their cars have been destroyed, their family have been moved out into other communities, yet the people that are responding are still there, making sure that things go along, although their home situation may not be taken care of. And so I definitely think that one person I would give a shout out to is our CEO, Brian Green, who definitely had personal issues that occurred because of the storm itself. I think UHD is very lucky to have Brian Green as one of their professors here within the nonprofit management program, but he definitely exemplifies a person who is a servant leader, someone who definitely responds well, regardless of whatever the situation is, and really does not take any credit based upon anything that he does. He had to deal with this in Katrina because he was the CEO of the New Orleans Food Bank. Then as soon as he came here, of course, then Rita occurred, and then Ike, and now this. And so, but definitely I think he's one of those people that really exemplifies servant leadership, someone who leads by example and really makes it for employees like myself gives an easy example for us to follow and really make sure that we want to exude those same qualities when we are working with the communities ourselves.
That's great.
And he looks great in the HEB commercial too.
Wonderful. Well, we'll go back to another question from a student. Christopher Visor asks, what are some goals each of you are working on for the future? I know, off the cuff.
Well, that's a great question because I ask myself that all the time and I don't know. I don't know what I want to do next. I feel like I'm currently in my dream job. That sounds hokey, but it's true. I feel like I'm going to my dream job every day. It's challenging, but I'm going there. I guess long term, my goals are just to continually invest in myself professionally, to become a better leader, to become a better manager, because leading and managing are two different things, you know. And I do think that those are some of the goals I think about. Career-wise, I'm still struggling on what I want to do next.
That's okay. We don't all have to know, right? What do y'all think?
I feel like I'm in a similar situation. The position that I'm in right now is a position that did not exist prior to me coming to the food bank. My position was basically designed specifically built upon the traits that I wanted to see the Houston Food Bank go towards. And so it is somewhat like you're saying, a dream job for me at this moment. I'm definitely a person who also likes to invest a lot in myself to make sure that when the next opportunity does come, that I'm ready for that opportunity. But I've also found that within this space that you're also able to create a lot of those opportunities as well. When I joined the Houston Food Bank from Feeding America, I was working in the agency services department, and that led to a position that I got to write my job title for, and the synopsis of it within the Food for Change manager position. Now I'm the director of Food for Change, and I have my own department when prior to that nothing of that existed. Food Bank had done the work that we're doing, and we're kind of leading the charge in that respect. I definitely think that as my career progresses, that I'm expecting for a lot of the opportunities that are created to come from within, as opposed to waiting on opportunities to come from without. And so, if I give advice to people as well, is essentially that a lot of times when you go into a position, you may only see that position, but there's oftentimes a lot of other opportunities that are available that are not there. But a lot of times you just have to have imagination and really vision of where you see yourself at, and really an understanding of what your skill set really provides for you to do. And so developing your skill set, developing those things that you may not be strong at, or really even developing your strengths are ways in which to kind of project yourself into the place you want to be. In a lot of ways, I didn't envision exactly what my role would be in the future, but I knew what I wanted to do. And that kind of led to the role that I'm in right now. And so I completely expect for that to continue.
That's great. Bill Kelly, I know you're currently in your dream job right now, probably.
I'm ready to retire. Now, I think if anybody is doing work that they really enjoy, part of what they really enjoy is being able to tell people about it, right? And so one of the things that we've done, typically the mayor is the person who is out front talking about issues with the city. What we've tried to do is be able to give a couple of ways that people easily communicate, and in this case, it's more website than it is, publishing a report. I know Children at Risk does a great job of putting their reports online and people being able to react and go with that. I've really tried to increase our transparency with our government relations department of 4 people at the City of Houston by creating a lot of websites that puts the issues that we're working on and what specifically the City of Houston has done on these things. For example, if you go to www.hue Legislative Report, you can just Google 2017 City of Houston Legislative Report, it'll come up, but that's huelegislativereport.org. You'll be able to see the issues that we worked on at the state level. One of which was being able to increase municipal access to this funding that was for what was called tipping fee. Tipping fee is what happens when a solid waste vehicle rolls up to a landfill and tips, right? And that fee used to go back to municipalities, but instead the state legislature cut that fee and now it goes almost exclusively to the TCEQ. Now, all of a sudden, municipal access to solid waste management and resources has become a very big topic for folks in Kingwood and West Houston, all over the city. And so being able to tell that story and have that online and say, this is what we were trying to work on, and now we've been with this example on it. So I really like just being able to talk about what you're working on and put that in, and it's, being in government, it's a little unique on it. You're able to get that out there. You have people that really want that accountability level with it, but it's our obligation to say, this is what I'm working on. I want to be proud of it. I want to be able to put it online. We did that with our HoustonPensionSolution.org website, as well as now with our legislative report. So I think that's probably one of the bigger things that I really like about this position on it, is having that opportunity to be able to tell people, yeah, these are the issues that we really care about.
That's great. We've had a couple of questions from students on various on your experiences. Any challenges you've had based on either your age, your race, or your gender? Is there any advice you'd give to our very diverse students that we have watching and as they move forward in their careers? I know it's a tough one that I didn't give y'all before.
It's a very complicated question because as a woman, you're automatically at a disadvantage. As a woman of color, you're at a double disadvantage. But you can't let that handicap you and make you think that you're less than. You're just as good as anybody else. And it's not that you have to prove yourself to anyone. You just need to do a good job and come to work every day committed to what you have to do and be a team player. And sometimes in my career I've had situations where people that look just like me, black female, have been some of my toughest adversaries. So you can't assume that just because someone's a different color or a different gender that they're going to treat you poorly, because sometimes it could be people who look just like you that can be really bad towards you.
And I think I touched upon this before, just because of a person being in a role. You can be young, you can look different than anybody else in that room, but you still need to be confident in your abilities to perform in any of those situations. I definitely think that the two things that you control are really your preparation as well as your own attitude and how you approach those situations. And so I definitely am a person that is aware of things that are going on around me, but I try not to allow those things to really affect my progression. And also, I think one of the other challenges, particularly being a supervisor, is that your employees are going to face some of those same issues as well. And you have to be vigilant enough to be able to both have their back and make sure that they are in spaces where they feel comfortable, but then also to coach them into how to deal with those situations as well. And so it's definitely something that's ongoing. There's always going to be a challenge and somebody in the space that's not going to respond well to you just because of how you look. But you definitely have the ability to control something within that situation, and you control yourself. And so I would always say just be prepared and always be mindful, but then also just go through and make sure you do the best that you can with your job, because it always speaks for itself. When it comes down to it, your work is always going to be the thing that speaks for you.
Great advice.
As a white Protestant male in America, that's making sure that you recognize the privilege that you bring to a lot of situations on it, particularly with a lot of elected officials. I mean, there are being very honest with it. There are conversations and doors I get to walk into that are closed to a lot of other people, and being cognizant of that, I think, is the first step on it. And more so, and I think our mayor and frankly our city and the organizations that both of you work for with it, understanding the strength that goes with diversity, I think is a big part of that. And when it comes to issues, understanding that, for example, when we had the Sanctuary Cities bill come up in the Texas House, which I know was a big concern to both of our groups on there, one of the people that gave one of the most emotional speeches was Representative Gene Wu. Even though he himself and frankly the Asian population would not have been the focus of what that bill was looking to address, he brought his family and how he had been brought up and that background to the forefront and gave one of the more emotional speeches against the measure on it. And I really think the city of Houston is great because of the Houstonians that make it up. And I know that our mayor, when you look at who he's appointed, who he has at his staff, I love our staff with the government relations team. We're a diverse group of folks. So I think being cognizant of who you are with it, number one, and being able to appreciate the diversity and realizing that it is a very big strength are probably the two biggest things I would put on that.
Great. That's wonderful advice, definitely, for our students. Now we'll end class with a fun question, and it has been requested that we ask this. Who would play you in a movie? Bill
Kerry
Kelly.
Washington, Olivia Pope.
Oh, there you go. I like it. Yeah. Clearly mine is Ian Ziering from Sharknado. Clearly. Yeah. Beverly Hills 90210, Steve Sanders. Yeah.
Who's the guy that played Jackie Robinson and James Brown? Since he can play anybody,
Yeah.
I would assume he could play me too.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, thank you for a wonderful hour with our students and for sharing your knowledge and your experiences. And I know that they've learned a lot. And thank you, students, for watching. This is the 4th week of class, and we will see you next week.